Good evening, everyone. Good evening, folks. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our Distinguished Speaker Series. We are so thankful to be here with Professor Choate from our biology department and Dr. Douglas joining us all the way from Australia. As we get settled in, we are letting folks just kind of trickle in. The doors are just now opening, so we will let folks find their seats, so to speak, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, get yourselves comfortable. We're in for a very special treat. I'm just hearing some wonderful research that will be shared with all of us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's get comfortable. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Professor Choate, Dr. Douglas, thank you all so much for being here. We're just seeing our attendees list increase, and so just waiting for our folks to join and find their way to the link. The webinar function sometimes makes it difficult for folks to get in, but I see those numbers rising. So I want to welcome everybody who is joining us this evening. It is currently 7 p.m. here in Bakersfield and Pacific Standard Time, but it is currently 12 p.m. or noon in, let me know if I get this right, Dr. Douglas, Australian Eastern Daylight
Eastern
Time?
Standard Time, Australian Eastern Standard Time. Daylight time for the other eastern states, but where I am, no daylight saving.
I see. So it is currently noon Friday in Australia. So thank you so much, Dr. Douglas, for being with us. And thank you to all of our attendees who are joining. We'll give it a few minutes for folks to join, and we'll get started, let's say, about 7:03. Again, I want to welcome everyone for joining us this evening. I am joined by Professor Ashley Choate, biology instructor at Bakersfield College, and Dr. Douglas joining us all the way from Australia, our distinguished speaker for the evening. I want to welcome everybody as they find their way to, as you find your way to your seats. We are live on our webinar. It is currently being recorded, will be available after. In the meantime, we're just giving folks a few minutes to trickle in. I expect that we'll see a couple more joining in just a bit, and then we'll get started thereafter. Wonderful. I'm seeing our numbers taper off, so we are going to go ahead and get started if that is good with everyone. Again, want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. We are very grateful to have you joining today's Distinguished Speaker Series at Bakersfield College. The Distinguished Speaker Series is hosted by our Bakersfield College Student Government Association and the Office of Student Life, in collaboration with multiple partners across campus. Today, we're so thankful to be joined by one of our faculty at Bakersfield College, Professor Ashley Choate. These webinars and many other student-centered events are made possible by our BCSGA, our KVC Student Services Program, which students have the option to get at the time of their registration. If you're interested in finding out more about that sticker, and the student services that it provides, please visit bakersfieldcollege.edu/BCSGA. And there you'll see all of the different programming that is happening around campus, both digitally and in person. A couple housekeeping items. I will not be the speaker today, but I do need to cover some housekeeping items so we can get this party started. Number one, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube for a few weeks after the presentation. That way students can also enjoy it if they were not able to join us tonight, also for community members. Closed captioning is also available. I want to give a special shout out to our captionist who is joining us today. And to enable closed caption, simply go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and you should see CC. And there you can see subtitles that will be live throughout the presentation. Because this is a webinar event, you will not be able to show your video or talk through your microphone. However, we do have our chat feature enabled, which allows you to engage with the panelists and other attendees. Please note that all inappropriate questions and or comments will be removed immediately. Also, we have what's called our Q&A module. At the end of Dr. Doug's presentation, we'll be having a Q&A session. To submit a question, simply scroll to the Q&A module at the bottom of your screen, and that's where you can submit your questions to us. We will review the questions and we'll respond either live or via the module in the chat near the end of the presentation. Again, this speaker series, the Distinguished Speaker Series, brings community leaders from around the world, quite literally, right? Dr. Douglas is joining us in Australia right now, whose achievements have had national and/or international significance. Each speaker was proposed to our Student Government Association by either a department or a faculty member, and really it takes a lot of effort from many entities on campus to make these events possible. So thank you to everybody who is supporting the Distinguished Speaker Series every year. All of these events are all free and open to the public, and most of the events this year are scheduled to occur via Zoom, so we hope that you can continue seeing us. For more information on all of our future speakers, please visit bakersfieldcollege.edu/student events/DSS. Great. I am just about wrapping up. Please, if you have any questions to ask during the presentation, again, submit them to the Q&A module. If it's a technical question, feel free to submit it. And if you have any other questions, please reserve them to the end. Without further delay, though, I want to welcome Professor Ashley Cho, Professor of Biology, and also a brand new mom who I know we're both interested in very in hearing what Dr. Douglas has to say. Professor Cho, I turn it away to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. So welcome everybody to the webinar. I'm really excited to bring Pam, as she told me I can call her, to Bakersfield College. Not only do I think that this is going to be a great resource for our students and our staff, but the community. I can tell you, as a new mom, my daughter is only 10 months old, that when I first started trying to navigate through infant sleep, it was really stressful. You're getting it from social media and from your pediatrician, and there's just a lot of information to wade through. And some of it aligned with what I felt in my heart was what I wanted to do, and some of it didn't. And I didn't know if I was doing something wrong or creating bad habits or crutches or all these words that you hear, right? And so I have some mommy apps and things like that that I use to chat with other moms, and I heard about the Possums program. And so I had to do a little bit of research, and when I found the Possums program and I found Pam's research, it just opened my eyes to what could be possible. And I can tell you, I went from stressed and depressed to really feeling joy in my new motherhood. And that's all because of you, Pam. So thank you. And so I would give you a little bit of background about Pam. For the past 15 years, she's worked with various teams have developed and published the evidence-based neuroprotective developmental care, also known as the Possums program. Her research has been supported by scholarships, healthcare education, and research development fellowships. She's been featured in medical publications such as the BMJ, the Archives of Disease in Childhood, and featured on a featured article in Breastfeeding Medicine. I'm happy to introduce general practitioner, lecturer, and founder of the nonprofit Possums program, Dr. Pamela Douglas. I hope you enjoy her talk as much as I did. And I'm going to plug your book because it saved my life, The Discontented Little Baby Book. Worth it.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you for making it possible for me to be here this evening. And also thanks to Leo for his support. Let me organise the screen share. So here I am having the honour of speaking to you tonight for you, middle of the day for me, on the topic of infant sleep. Time for a paradigm shift. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which I stand, the Jagera and Turrbal people, who have been raising their babies and children for 65,000 years continuously. I honour their elders past, present and future, and we acknowledge that the land has never been ceded. So here I am speaking to you from Brisbane on the east coast of Australia, from the state known as Queensland, also referred to as the Sunshine State. And indeed today, you can't see it, but there's not a cloud in the sky and it's really warm. I'd like to start by the formal declaration of conflict that we like as researchers to start any talk with. And to let you know that in 2013, I, with a team of others, founded a charity called Possums and Co. that, given the vagaries of the Australian health system, doesn't receive any external funding, and therefore sells programs to parents and indeed education events to health professionals, keeping our costs as low as we possibly can. But we have a breastfeeding online self-help program, the Possums Baby and Toddler Sleep program, a parent hub for closed online peer support, facilitated these days by a full-time perinatal mental health expert and parent mentors. And we also offer accreditation in neuroprotective developmental care for health professionals, a providers and educators course for those who are interested in our work but aren't registered health professionals. And all of this is available at possumsonline.com. So why does this topic that we're engaging tonight about baby sleep matter so much once a baby has arrived into your world? So we know from the research, and I won't try to detail everything that I've got on the slides, but we know from the research that perhaps over a third of parents throughout that first year of life describe really significant problems with their baby's sleep. And many, perhaps again a third, are turning to their health professionals seeking help. Many, many more than that will be looking at books, websites, and in particular social media for support. However, parents very early on, and Ashley referred to this in her kind introduction to me, parents very early on find that they're encountering the roadblock of huge amounts of conflicting advice, coming not only from social media and peers, but from health professionals whom they really trust, whose presence is tremendously valuable in their lives. But we have a health system problem where there's enormous amounts of conflicting advice, including around this important topic of infant sleep. And it's into this space then, many years ago now, that I and colleagues came, developing up an evidence base that we now refer to as Neuroprotective Developmental Care, that offers programs that are embedded in the concept of cued care, responsive care to our babies, helping parents and their babies get in sync, or indeed dial down the sympathetic nervous system of both the baby and the parent. Neuroprotective developmental care has 4 domains, in fact, which do interact together: the breastfeeding, the cry-fuss problems, and of course that very important domain of the support of parent mental health and well-being. But here we are tonight focusing on infant sleep. And I'd like to show you a vignette now. Hannah and baby Ben. Little 3-month-old baby, and Hannah's having a really hard time. She's exhausted and miserable. She feels herself locked into sleep battles with her baby and is housebound as she tries to manage this.
Pam. So, hi Hannah, I'm Pam. So how can I help you today?
It's so unusual that he's even sleeping right now. He never does this during the day.
A number of women who say that to me. They come in here and the baby's sleeping for the first time in, So tell me what has been happening for you and Ben with sleep.
he doesn't sleep really.
Mm.
Yeah, I've got to do something. I'm going out of my brain. My husband's worried about me. You know, he thinks that we should do controlled comforting.
Mm-hmm.
But basically Ben just doesn't sleep. He wakes 6 or 7 or more times through the night.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, or more.
So tell me about it.
Well, I mean, I usually try to put him to bed at 6:30.
This is in the evenings.
In the evenings, yeah. And then from 6:30, he'll probably wake maybe 2 or 3 times. But you know, it's just impossible because I can't relax with my, like, I'm so exhausted already, and then I can't relax with I get no time to relax with my husband because I'm just constantly afraid that he's going to start crying, you know, 2-3 times between 6:30 and 10 when we go to bed. And then he does sleep, probably his best sleep between about 10 and maybe 2. And then he'll keep waking up every hour after that until I get up at 7. But you know, honestly, I can't always get up at 7. Sometimes I just try and sleep in as long as I can, if I can get him to keep sleeping.
Yeah.
You know, everyone says that he's overtired and overstimulated, and that I just really need to stay home and get him into a really good sleep routine.
Hannah, what have you actually tried?
I did do responsive settling from 6 weeks.
Uh-huh.
And I always put him down as soon as I see the tired signs. You know, he starts to grizzle, he starts to get a little bit upset, and I'll put him down. But he just never falls asleep. As soon as I leave the room, he's crying. As soon as I leave him, he's crying. And I can never get him to go back to sleep. He doesn't ever go into a second sleep cycle. If he wakes up, he maybe naps for 20 minutes during the day, and he's waking up all night, and I'm so exhausted. You know, and my husband's at work all day, and I actually feel like I'm going crazy in the house.
Yeah.
He's just so overtired, you know, so overtired. And I pat and I pat and I pat and I pat. It just doesn't work. But it's my fault. You know, I let him set up really bad habits, and now I'm the one who's paying for it. It's my fault. I shouldn't have. Next baby, if I could ever do this again, I will start responsive settling from day 1.
So you can see, and perhaps many of you have experienced this in your own life, the enormity actually of Hannah's journey with baby Ben around sleep, and how this is impacting on her emotional well-being. So what Hannah has just described to us that she was referring to as responsive settling, which is one of the names that it's given, at least here in Australia. She's really referring, though, to the set of strategies that we might refer to together tonight as sleep training. And sleep training, it's important to know that sleep training actually arose in the 50s and 60s out of that first wave of behaviorism that swept the English-speaking world after the Second World War. Behaviorism itself has moved into the second wave, and you'd be most familiar, I suspect, with traditional cognitive behavioural therapy, which is a second wave behaviourism. And then indeed, the third wave of behaviourism from the 2000s. And in particular, in that third wave, I've been interested for many years in acceptance and commitment therapy, applied functional contextualism, a very powerful set of psychological strategies, I would argue, for the perinatal period. But, you know, from the 50s, 60s, 70s, first wave behaviorism or sleep training has remained dominant in the care of new families as they do a journey with their baby around sleep. And here's a list of some of those basic strategies that you'll perhaps recognise that are very widely recommended, but actually come out of first wave behaviorism, out of the philosophy really that we can train an infant's biology in order to teach babies to sleep through the night earlier than they otherwise perhaps might. So first wave behaviorism, sleep training, we're talking to parents about the need to teach self-settling, to not let babies be awake for more than such and such a window of time, depending on the age of the baby, to put together second sleep cycles during the day, to not let the baby get overtired or overstimulated, to work on the principle that sleep breeds sleep. So the bigger blocks of sleep you can get during the day, the better. Aim for 12 hours in the cot overnight, getting nice early bedtimes. Avoid overstimulation and overtiredness. That's language that's very commonly used in our first wave behavioural approaches. Quiet, dark rooms during the day. Lists of tired cues. These are very typical of the programs that come under the umbrella of sleep training or first wave behaviourism. And you'll see there's a kind of discourse, a languaging that comes out of that approach. And I would argue that much of this languaging can be very disempowering for families. So first wave behaviourism actually does disrupt cued care, even though all the neuroscience tells us that that responsivity, that cued care, optimises developmental outcomes for our little ones. So sleep training does ask that we delay responses to our baby's cues, or that we respond perhaps with patting or patting the mattress, but not as the baby intends, which we kind of know in our heart is that baby's wanting to be picked up. Sleep training asks us to ignore the powerful biological cue of falling asleep at the end of feeds. Gives those lists of tired cues, as we mentioned, which again can be quite disempowering for parents because it takes away from that sense of just experimenting to get to know the baby. A yawn or rubbing the eyes doesn't always mean that that little one has to put their head down instantly, for instance. And a baby may be dialing up or getting grizzly, not because they immediately need to go to sleep, but because they're wanting a change of environmental experience. The recommendations about durations of wake and sleep time can also be very disempowering for families, particularly if you have a baby who's a low sleep need baby. So the critical question here is, does the evidence show that first wave behavioural strategies or sleep training is effective? And actually there's now 5 systematic reviews, one of which I co-authored with a colleague, but another 4 that show that the sleep training or first wave behavioural approaches do not decrease frequency of night waking. So the systematic reviews show that there may be about half an hour's longer period of time spent in the cot overnight, but we don't know if the baby's really sleeping in that time, but no decrease in the frequency of night waking. And let's face it, when parents embark upon the sleep training process, the hope is that the baby will wake less at night. There's also no reliably demonstrated improved outcomes, short or long term, for both mother and baby. Importantly, if we really look at the research, the first wave behavioural strategies are not improving developmental outcomes. There is a link in the research between unsettled infant behaviour, variably defined in the first months of life, and sleep and behavioural problems at preschool, school age. But this is an association, and I think you would understand that there's a big difference between an association in research and a causative link. And in fact, we argue in our work that it could even be the application of first wave behavioural approaches that dials up both the parent and the baby and explains that link. Nevertheless, however that link is explained, there's no evidence that bringing in first wave behavioural approaches in very early life actually improves sleep or developmental outcomes. And this has been followed to at least 6 years of age now. And this can be quite surprising information for me to share with you. Sleep training may actually worsen parent-infant sleep, firstly by disrupting cued care and dialing everybody up in the night, but also very, very importantly, by disrupting the infant's circadian clock over time. A big focus on large blocks of sleep during the day may not impact the first few nights, but over time can result in disruption to the circadian clock and excessive night waking. Sleep training with the spacing out of feeds that often goes with it may also disrupt breastfeeding success. So it was watching all of this emerge in the literature many years ago now, and really there's more and more evidence to support what I've been sharing with you to this moment in the talk. But years ago, I could see that we really needed a different way of making sense of baby sleep. And I, with various colleagues over the years, went back to the research literature and we developed what's popularly known as the Possums Baby and Toddler Sleep Program. Here in Australia, we're very fond of our possums and we'll often call little people bubbies, toddlers, poss or possum. I understand that possums are not necessarily as well loved in other parts of the world, but really that's the popular term for the Neuroprotective Developmental Care programs. And so this approach to sleep really does offer a paradigm shift, and it can be quite disorienting for both health professionals and parents as we do the sort of mental shift to experimenting with a different way of thinking about baby sleep. This sleep program applies an integrative, interdisciplinary lens across sleep science, lactation science, the neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and also integrates in strategies out of acceptance and commitment therapy. Importantly, this approach to infant sleep rethinks behaviorism and argues that, in fact, the first wave behavioural approaches with an emphasis on sleep associations of, say, white noise or the cot or a particular sleep aid misunderstands stimulus control of infant sleep, which is, if we look at the sleep science, entirely under the regulation of the sleep pressure. So the only stimulus for sleep is sleep pressure. And this is in the context of the function of the circadian clock as well. Now, just to flag that we have multiple publications in which you'll see both the evidence base for the Possum Sleep Program laid out and the evaluations to date. Just to look a little bit more closely at those evaluations, the first one was run by Professor Helen Ball, who came out to Australia from the UK to do a sabbatical in the Possums clinic with me here in Brisbane. And that preliminary evaluation was positive. She then, with myself and a UK team, adapted the Possum Sleep Program to the UK context, calling it Sleep Baby and You. And you'll see the results of quite a substantial evaluation there, freely available, open access on PLOS One. We've also evaluated health professional responses to delivering the Possums Sleep program. And what was really interesting, I thought there, apart from their positive feedback about the program, was that they reported improvement in their own sleep quality. We've recently, actually this one has come out, I changed that slide there, but in Turkey, a team of paediatricians showed significantly improved breastfeeding outcomes in an RCT with the Possums adaptation that they used around sleep in their clinic. So let's have a closer look together then at how we would deal with Hannah and Ben if they were coming to you with the kind of distress that we saw Hannah speak to. So we'd certainly start with our history and examination. We need to do that in great detail, really, understanding what's happening right around the clock, day and night. We want to make sure that we're eliminating any underlying viral infection or medical condition that might be interfering with sleep. We certainly want to make sure that there's no unidentified and unmanaged breastfeeding problems, which is more relevant in those early weeks of life for our babies. But then we distinguish between developmentally normal night waking, and I'm just going to break it to you now because it is painful to hear, but if we look at the research, every couple of hours throughout the first year of life into toddlerhood, upper normal, but it is normal for many of our little people, as long as we can get you all back to sleep really quickly. And then the problem that we see so significantly in our societies at the moment is disruption of the circadian clock, excessive night waking, every hour, every 45 minutes, every half an hour for patterns throughout many of the nights of the week. And this results from disruption to the circadian clock. So when we're delivering the Possums Sleep program, after we've done our initial assessment, history and assessment, we educate parents about sleep science. So, of course, I can't run through everything in the time that I've got to share with you this evening, but I'm going to do my best to give you a sense of what this is about and then direct you to resources. And you'll see there's a lot of freely available material online now through possumsonline.com. Very importantly, infant sleep needs are highly biologically variable. So we can have newborns who need only 9 hours total in a 24-hour period, maybe half an hour total napping during the day, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And although this little one is at the very low end of the bell curve, and although I wouldn't really wish a low sleep need baby like that upon any parents, because it's hard. We have to look at strategies as to how to manage a very low sleep need baby like that. But we can't make babies sleep beyond their biological need. And this little one at the very low end of the sleep need bell curve will have normal sleep and normal developmental outcomes down the track. And then we can have a newborn who needs twice as much in a 24-hour period, also normal, with normal developmental outcomes. And we see similar findings of tremendous variability in sleep needs right into toddlerhood. I've just detailed on these slides some of the studies that are most pertinent to this information. Now, in terms of frequency of night waking, I've already broken it to you that every couple of hours throughout infancy into toddlerhood is normal, upper normal, but very, very common. And in fact, we just need to know that only a minority of babies are sleeping through the night at, say, 3 months or 8 months, despite what you hear all around you. So By 12 months, maybe 50% of our little ones will have a pattern of sleeping perhaps 8 hours without signalling for parents, but the other half of our little ones will be waking regularly. And at 2 years of age, that percentage decreases. There may be something more like 5% of our 2-year-olds who are waking in the night, but these are normal little ones. They're normal developmentally, just at that end of the bell curve. You see, because sleep is biologically regulated, we need to face, I think, as a society, the sleep paradox by trying to make our babies sleep more, by trying to shape the biology, normal biology of infant sleep. We can end up making families' lives much more difficult than they need to be and can actually seriously disrupt our families' sleep. We've already discussed that we can reassure parents that whether you have a little one who's low sleep need or not, the duration of sleep is not linked with, well, certainly low sleep need babies are not impacted in any way developmentally or cognitively. The way you might hear all around at the moment, actually, parents are being told that if they want to optimize their baby's sleep habits down the track and optimize the baby's cognitive and mental health development, they need to be getting these big blocks of sleep and big uninterrupted blocks at night. That's actually, I put it to you, a misreading of what's there in the evidence. We do need to talk to parents about the 2 biological sleep regulators. So we have the sleep-wake homeostat, which I touched on before, but this is a system of neurohormones in all of us, adult or child or baby, that rises when we're awake and then drops off when we sleep, often drops off quite precipitously, actually, that sleep pressure. So when I wake in the morning, not having babies in the house, my sleep pressure is really low and it's gradually rising all day. And let's say at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, my sleep pressure peaks. I feel sleepy and I put my head down to sleep. Well, for our babies, their sleep pressure is rising much more quickly. But the function of the daytime nap is just to take the edge off that rising sleep pressure so that the little one's sleep pressure is still well aligned with the adults at night. The circadian clock is the other biological sleep regulator that will be familiar to you, I suspect. It's, it's set by the sun. And what's critical here is that we want to keep the circadian cues of daylight, noise, activity, really quite separate to the cues of the big sleep at night, the health of the sleep regulators in our infants. Now, of course, at night, we're still eye contacting and responding to that baby as the baby needs, but the environmental cues will be it's quiet, it's dark, parents are trying to sleep and might be just that little bit lazier in response. Evenings, and this is an important thing to communicate to you, evenings we conceptualize as day, really. There's still the light, noise, activity, family life. There's quite a bit of talk at the moment about melatonin, the idea that we dim the lights, that will impact on melatonin and help with baby sleep. I put it to you, that's a misreading of the evidence. We don't really need to focus on melatonin levels at all. That will follow what we're doing with the sleep regulators. And evenings is a time when babies are still needing lots of rich environmental stimulation, sensory nourishment, which we'll talk about in a bit, and can be thought of as light noise activity. We're still underway enjoying this world. It is actually quite important to know, though, that it takes 1 to 2 weeks to reset the circadian clock once it's disrupted. And unfortunately, we see a lot of disruption to the circadian clock in our little ones because families are trying so hard to get these bigger blocks of sleep during the day, partly because they're told erroneously that this is optimizing the baby's learning and optimizing developmental outcomes. But also, let's face it, if you're a primary carer for that bubby, we're just hanging out for a break during the day in a world where often there's not a great deal of support for that primary carer during the day. It's very tempting to think of sleep time as a time when you can meet your own needs, maybe even get something done, but ideally meet your own needs. And if we have a high sleep need baby, that can work quite well. But for many of us with either medium to low sleep need babies, it can be really problematic if we're using the baby's sleep time as that place where we fuel ourselves up. And we have to look at other ways of rest and restoration for that primary carer. But we do live in a world where, with such a big focus on getting big blocks of sleep during the day, like mini nighttime sleeps during the day, we're getting a lot of unnecessary and completely unmanageable disruption to baby sleep and therefore parents' sleep at night. And we can deal with this actually through our Possum sleep program, but it does take 1 to 2 weeks to reset the circadian clock. So if we're working with a family, we start with the daytime sleep actually, and then that impacts on any unnecessary and unmanageable night waking that we're experiencing. So we do want to start by setting the circadian clock at a very regular time. As soon as we've got sleep difficulties with excessive night waking, the first thing we do is ask the family what the earliest possible get-up time is for that family. Now, if we're dealing with a newborn, we may not be quite so to the minute about this, but let's say we have an older child, a bubby who's moving through the 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months into toddlerhood, and then right throughout childhood. As soon as we've got excessive night waking, as soon as we've got problems with sleep at night, the very first thing we want to do is to set the circadian clock with a regular get-up time as early as you can possibly do it as a family, because clearly the earlier you start the day, then the earlier that little person will go down to bed at night. But people will tell you that healthy baby sleep, healthy toddler sleep is about a regular bedtime at night. That's a misreading of the sleep science. Healthy infant sleep, going right through to school age, is about a regular get-up time. So we can be relaxed about that if there's no real worries. We can have our weekend sleep in if, on the whole, our child sleeps honky-dory. But as soon as we've got issues, we want to set that regular get-up time and stick to it. And of course, if there is another loving adult in the house, the primary carer, the person attending in the night might be able to have a sleep in. Often there'll be a quick little breastfeed depending on the age of that baby. And then the baby might go out for a little adventure with the other loving adult while the person who's been on duty in the night has a sleep in. But for the baby, a regular get-up time, really, I'm afraid even half an hour's variation can start to kick in a little like jet lag. So it's alarm and then daylight noise activity, we're underway. Again, it doesn't mean that we're in any way unkind to that bubby. It might just be that we're up turning on the radio and getting a cup of coffee with the little one on our hip or in our arms. But gradually over 1 to 2 weeks, this is how we reset the circadian clock. Now, many of our little ones are dialing up, crying and fussing during the day because inside our interior environments, inside the home, little ones do dial up due to a hunger for richer sensory experience, richer environmental experience. Our interior environments, unfortunately, are very low sensory for our babies. And you might, those of you who have babies or have had babies, you might know that you step outside the house and that little one immediately dials down, coming into contact with the complexity of the outdoor world. If you're in a climate where the outdoor world is not a possible place to be, it's deep winter, you might be visiting friends, or you might be going to a parent group, or you might be visiting your workplace, or you might be getting tasks done at the shop. Anything outside the home better meets a baby's sensory needs and helps dial that little one down. So you can see that in the Possum Sleep program, this NDC approach to infant sleep, we're not problematizing stimulation. We just don't use the word overstimulation, because we know that our little ones are laying down neural pathways in those first weeks, months of life that last a lifetime and are in direct response to rich and changing sensory input. So in fact, the evidence tells us that rich environmental stimulation optimizes, one of those few vital factors that optimizes developmental outcomes. So you can see that our primary carers are really encouraged to plan richly engaged days outside the home that meet the primary carers' needs, or perhaps the needs of the older siblings running around to, well, you know, soccer practice or music classes or school drop-off, or following those older kids, or simply meeting that primary carer's social needs to be engaged, meeting at other people's homes, having, you know, satisfying social encounters with the expectation that the baby fits in. And in this, you'll see in the NDC programs, we combine this with the concept of frequent flexible feeds for those little ones in the first 6 months of life. But this means that we're supporting parents, if we're thinking first 6 months of life, in 2 tools which make the days manageable: the frequent flexible use of the breast, or indeed paced bottle feeding, and then the change of sensory experience. Those are the 2 tools we have in those first months of life to make the days as easy and as enjoyable as possible outside the home as much as possible. As the little one moves into the second half of the first year of life, they'll be taking solids, and then we're really looking, we're assuming that little one's nutritional needs are met, and we're looking at change of sensory experience. We certainly want to be educating parents that they don't need to be worried about breastfeeding or indeed bottle feeding a baby to sleep, that this is biologically normal. It's not setting up bad habits the way parents hear. And in fact, if we disrupt that dialing down into sleep, we can make the whole sleep journey far more complex than it needs to be. Our older bubs often will come to the breast, let's say, during the day, and they're just there for half a minute. They wanted to know that their mother was there, and then they're wanting a change of sensory nourishment. Or similarly, with caregivers using bottles or whatever, you know, we want to feel as though, particularly in those early months, we can be very flexible with feeds, and sometimes they will fall off to sleep with either the breast or the bottle, and it's just not a problem. There's some videos freely available that may be useful for you as we think about sensory motor development on the possumsonline.com website, and I've put in QR codes in the hope that that's useful too. So the evening, as I've already mentioned, becomes a time in which we're still focused on meeting our baby's sensory needs until we reach the big sleep at night. It's worth knowing that internationally, babies are going to sleep much closer to parent bedtime than they do in the English-speaking world. And you can see that the little ones who are being, parents are being told to put the little one down at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. You can see the risk there of frequent waking from 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. because that little person's circadian clock is not well aligned with the parent's and his or her metabolism is kind of ready to start the day from 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So turning our attention to in the night, really we want to make what happens in the night as easy as possible. We want to get everyone back to sleep as quickly as possible. And depending on the age of the baby, this is likely to be, for those who are breastfeeding, most easily done with a breastfeed, but otherwise with the bottle. It's important to communicate to parents, and this will seem also quite startling, that we don't need to be burping our babies after feeds, certainly not in the night. It's quite disruptive to going back to sleep, but not even during the day, because babies aren't swallowing air. And I know this from the research from imaging studies, the way everyone does tell you at the minute. So bubbies will burp and burp quite loudly. But we actually don't need to be engaged in burping practices, which tend to rouse babies. We don't need to be holding them up right after feeds. This little one here in that image looks very happy on what could even be grandma's shoulder. So it's not that it's bad, but we don't have to be holding babies up right after feeds. And we certainly don't need to be swaddling, because really when we look at the research, the swaddling doesn't decrease night waking, and it can be quite disruptive. Certainly if we're breastfeeding, we don't want to be swaddling a baby during feeds because that interferes with positional stability. But then if we have to sort of re-wrap or even zip back up into a little love to dream suit, that can be quite disruptive, as we're really just wanting that little one to go easily back into sleep with that feed. I just want to bring your attention now to this set of psychological strategies, this third wave behaviorism, popularly referred to as acceptance and commitment therapy, that I think actually originated with Steve Hayes over your way, but that's been sweeping the world now, and which we, with our Neuroprotective Developmental Care, integrate deeply into all the work that we're doing with parents. Actually, there's an introductory workshop available there online. Anyone can do that, who's interested in acceptance and commitment therapy for perinatal and infant mental health. Remember too that it's not frequency of night waking that's linked with postnatal depression, but difficulty getting back to sleep certainly is. And so we integrate these strategies for managing the busy brain and those anxious feelings that are so normal after the birth of a baby. The ACT strategies can be very powerful in helping us deal with those. ACT supports what we would call psychological flexibility, being able to live through this journey with a new little person in our life in a way that aligns with our values and allows us to create a rich, full and meaningful life, even though this is a time that can be filled with challenge. So without spending too much time on it, we're looking at use of values clarification, cognitive diffusion, experiential acceptance, contact with the present moment, committed action, and deep, deep self-compassion. We've got freely available, have a look because there's so much free resource on our website, possumsonline.com, but there's also a set of short videos that offer these strategies in a way that are particularly relevant, I like to think, for the perinatal period. Oh, this is just to show you that on our website, possumsonline.com, we've got a lot of free videos that deal with some of these most commonly asked questions about infant sleep. And then we do have the Possums Baby and Toddler Sleep program available for a small nominal fee, and access to our parent support hub as well. I also wanted to let you know that there's a series of freely available articles published through a magazine online, the Hey Baby series, in which I again have written about these aspects to the Possum Sleep program that we're discussing tonight. Tis my book, which does give an overview of all of this work. For those of you who are health professionals, we have the accreditation pathway, and we have quite a few folks joining us from North America. And I believe, hopefully I haven't gone too far over time, that I need to draw my talk to an end there, but I look forward to dealing with some questions that you might have.
Dr. Douglas, thank you so much for such an informative presentation. I'm not a parent, but I'm furiously jotting down notes for when, for when the special occasion should arise, that I'm like, hey, this is what I was told. So thank you so much. Really quickly, I just wanted to again invite all of our attendees and participants. If you have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A module. Again, we have quite literally world-renowned expert on baby sleep, and would love to hear your questions answered. So please make sure to get them into the Q&A module now. And with that, I want to welcome back Professor Cho to start our Q&A portion of this evening. Professor Cho will be moderating the questions, and I hope that we can have some fruitful conversation. So thank you so much.
Okay, so I have a few here, so I'm going to start at the top. Any suggestions for helping a baby sleep longer at night? I have a 5-month-old and he sleeps from 8:30 p.m. to 6 a.m., but he might need more than that, ? He wakes up once to feed.
Well, Ashley, I would say to that parent that waking up once to feed is actually pretty good, because so many families have their little ones waking every couple of hours, which is normal. And then there's all those families where the baby's waking every 45 minutes, every hour, which is definitely excessive night waking that we want to deal with. So I suppose I'd like to be really very reassuring that this little one's sleeping from 8:30 p.m. till about 6 a.m. with the one wake in the night. If that person was in front of me, I'd be saying, how long are you awake for? Because we wouldn't want that parent to be awake for, 2 hours at that one feed time. We'd want everyone back to sleep anyway quite quickly. But it does sound like very, very normal. And I wouldn't be worrying that little person needs more sleep.
Okay, great. What if a baby wakes up earlier than usual, around 5:30 a.m., acts very alert? I breastfeed and attempt to put back down to no avail. He does not wake up at consistent times.
So I guess what I'd be saying there is that little one's circadian clock is, well, often moving into arousal at 5:30 a.m., although there is a comment that it's somewhat inconsistent, this wake up time. So this is a situation where if 5:30 a.m. really doesn't work for those parents, for that family, you might over a 2-week period want to change the setting of the circadian clock. I can see in midwinter where you are, 5:30 a.m. could be very unpleasant. But we have to bear in mind that if we're going to be incrementally pushing the bedtime back little bit by little bit over a 2-week period to get a later get up time, that the little person is likely to be around in the evenings wanting lots of play and attention. And so it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Some families will say, I'm willing to get up at 5:30 a.m. I can see that my little one's sleep pressure's dropped right off, circadian clock set for approximately 5:30 a.m. start. That kind of works for us because my little one's going down at a manageable time in the evening. Another family might say, no, I'm just going to incrementally change the settings on the circadian clock so that that little person starts the day later. But be prepared to be doing a lot of interacting and sensory stimulation in the evenings, because we can't make our babies sleep longer. We can trust our baby's sleep needs. If we're offering rich and changing sensory stimulation during the day and in the evenings, we can trust our baby's sleep needs, but we can't make babies sleep the way you hear.
Wonderful, thank you. My baby, approximately 5 months old, slams his feet at night. Is this a self-soothing activity? He seems to stay asleep or be still asleep.
Yes, I wouldn't feel concern about that. Obviously, any parent who has concerns about their baby needs to talk to their own family physician. But to me, that just sounds like normal. You know, there's often a lot of flailing and moving around at night, isn't there, from our little people? And to me, that sounds very normal. But it's hard for parents because you're waking up and thinking, what is happening? But it does sound normal.
Okay, great. Do you recommend noise machines at night and during daytime naps, or not at all?
Yes, well, I personally don't recommend noise machines. This is not bad, but it's just that it's not going to help with the baby's sleep. So the idea that sleep associations, for instance, the white noise, actually enhances sleep comes out of this philosophy that we get good sleep from our babies if we develop up sleep associations. And, you know, that's a misreading of the sleep science, because you can put on the white noise, but if the baby's sleep pressure isn't really nice and high, then that little one is just not going to go to sleep, you know. Whereas regardless of what's happening, and it could be you're in a rock concert, if that little person's sleep pressure is really high, he or she will just go off to sleep. So it's all about the sleep pressure is the association that sends bubbies to sleep, not white noise or sleep aids or developing an association with the cot. It is a misreading of the sleep science.
Okay. I have a 10-month-old that wakes every 30 minutes after we put her to bed for the night until we go to bed, and we take her with us. We're co-sleeping, or I would go crazy. I could have written this myself. She gets a lot of stimulation and she naturally wakes up at 6 a.m. every morning.
Yeah. Well, if the parent who's posing that was in front of me, I'd be just checking in on what time the parents are going to sleep and what time they're putting the little one down. But this pattern of putting the little one down, so I'll just pull times. Let's say it's 7:30 p.m. These parents are popping that little one down to sleep. Let's say there's a breastfeed off to sleep, and then every half an hour until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, those parents are going in and perhaps offering breastfeeds and having to get that little one back to sleep. So that's actually quite a common pattern, and the way families deal with it is just perhaps to incrementally push that bedtime back a little bit later, night after night, 10 minutes later tonight, 10 minutes later the next night. Not to be unkind to your baby, but you can see that the sleep pressure really isn't quite high enough to be keeping that little one down in deep sleep. And often they're very attuned anyway to what's happening in the family life. It's like a fear of missing out, isn't it? And if the sleep pressure is not that high, she'll be wanting you in there until the whole family's settling for the night. So, internationally, as I mentioned, little ones tend to go to sleep a lot closer to family bedtime. And given that it's not restful for parents, let's face it, we're hanging out for some quiet time in the evenings, either together or to get something done. And that's why it's so tempting to get the little one down early. But actually, if you're having to get up every half an hour to resettle, there's not the benefit, and it may be better to just bring that little person into family life, except that for some months yet, you know, the evenings are going to be shared with that little person. It will change over time, particularly as daytime naps shrink away, as they do throughout the first year of life into toddlerhood. Then you'll find that bedtimes may be, you know, quite a bit earlier than parent bedtime. But families in that first year of life who describe this pattern of constant waking until the parents go to bed find that overall life is just much more manageable if we surrender to the idea that for some time yet the baby's going to be there in the middle of our life together in the evenings, not fighting it so much, bringing the baby's bedtime closer to when we go to sleep, so that you know, it sounds like sleep with this family from the bedtime of parents is working okay. But I propose that it might just make sense to not try to put the baby down quite so early in the evening.
Okay, thank you. If we currently swaddle, do you recommend stopping outright?
Yes, now this will depend on the age of the baby too, because by about 12 weeks, and in fact, some authorities recommend, you know, not so far after 8 weeks, we need to stop swaddling, stop wrapping in the night, because some babies are precocious in their turning over. They can turn over from quite early on. And of course, being wrapped when a baby can turn from the back, which is where we're safely sleeping our babies, to their side or their tummy, increases risk of SIDS. So families will need to have stopped swaddling anyway certainly by about the 12-week mark. So some families do that incrementally. If you're using what we call over here the love to dream suits with the little arms up like this, some families just let one arm out at first, and then after a few nights the other. Others just go, all right, we're not going to swaddle anymore, and it may be a night or two as the baby adjusts. But really, you know, you hear, oh, the baby will startle themselves awake and that's going to interfere with sleep. That's a misconception. Babies who are startling awake are babies whose sleep pressure isn't that high and whose circadian clock isn't as well aligned with the parents as it needs to be. So, you know, there's many families who just never quite go down the wrapping path for the bubby, and that's absolutely fine. We don't, in the Possums programs, we don't promote it. It's not, these things aren't bad. Parents just find their own way through, experiment with what works for them as a family, but bearing in mind that from a safety point of view, we don't want to be wrapping babies once there's any chance that they can roll.
Thank you. I'm a local IBCLC, and this information is incredibly helpful. Do you think it is inherently more difficult on parents when the baby is their first, since there's naturally less stimulation in the home?
How interesting. I completely concur. I agree. So we're often saying that firstborns are at a little bit of a disadvantage because they don't have another sibling or more tearing around inside the home to provide some level of sensory nourishment. And so we'll often say to parents, you know, if you choose to have another child, you'll find that this second baby just has to fit in because you are out doing the kindy drop-offs or the music group for the older child or the play dates. And then that second baby can seem so much easier because he or she is being bathed in rich sensory stimulation. They love it, following a sibling around through the day, being out and about. So I think that's a very a spot-on observation. And so the primary carers with firstborns just have to get out of the house and create their own social engagements, meet up with other parents who have children, and create that village outside the house that most of us, many of us actually don't have inside the house.
Great, thank you. Are sleep associations not necessary? What if you bed share and as the baby gets older and moves more, it isn't possible to continue? Could a sleep association help with transition to a crib?
Well, again, depending on the age of the baby, there comes a point in time, particularly moving through that second half of the first year of life, where many families find that cots just don't work. So say we're looking at, let's talk about, say, a 10-month-old, 11-month-old baby who in this scenario has been co-sleeping, sharing the mattress surface, which just needs to be done. The evidence would seem to suggest it's not the sharing of the bed surface that in any way places babies at risk, it's knowing how to do it safely. And I guess I'll just plug there the BASIS site in the UK, BASIS, an excellent site by Professor Helen Ball and her team from Durham that details safe infant sleep and safe bed sharing in the night with a whole bank of photos that can be really helpful for parents. So I won't run through that obviously now, but let's say we've got this little person who's been bed sharing. The parents are, just over, it's time to think of another way of managing the nights. Often the cot doesn't work because the older they get, the bigger, the longer, the more likely as you do that transfer into the cot that it is that this little person starts banging a hand against the bars or stirs. And so I'd like to share with you an idea that can be very helpful for families with an older baby moving into toddlerhood. And that's the concept of a child safe room, if you're fortunate enough to have a separate room that you can put this little person in. So completely child safe with child-proof gate, and then a nice spacious mattress on the floor, making sure that if that little person who we're assuming is quite mobile now wakes and moves, that it's safe. But it may be, you see, that the parent, let's say the breastfeeding mum, can go in as soon as that little one starts to call out for a parent, lie beside the baby, give the feed, and fall asleep if that happens, because it's not a problem, but also start to do that transition of rolling herself out and getting back to the parental bed, rather than actually trying to lift the baby out into a cot, which can be really quite tough. So we want to make it still as easy as possible in the night, but this concept, this transitional concept of a mattress on the floor in a childproof room can be really helpful. You can see that I'm not thinking that sleep associations as such, again, have any role, because sleep is actually under the control of sleep pressure, which we want to be really nice and high, and we let sleep pressure get higher and higher and higher, dialing the baby down with sensory nourishment until that little one has either just dropped off to sleep or a quick feed or bottle and that little one drops into sleep.
Great, thank you. Do babies eventually learn how to self-soothe as they get older? We rock my 5-month-old to sleep and he will sleep for a few hours and cry when he can't settle again.
Yes, and I mean, I hate to break it, but, I would be saying what happens in my mind from what I know of the research is that that's developmentally normal. And I whizzed through those slides, but, if the parent asking this has interest, you can go back to the slides there and see the studies that show that unfortunately, that waking even after every 2 hours, but fortunately with this 5-month-old, it seems to be, every 4 hours, I think the parent was saying, and then wakes looking for parental soothing. This is developmentally normal. It's evolutionary. It's biological. And then in this case, the parents soothe and rock, which is a sort of enveloping sensory experience. The little one feels safe and drops back into sleep. Some families will be using a breastfeed or using a bottle. In this family, their ways is the the rocking back to sleep. but it is developmentally normal. Families are often encouraged to night wean with the idea that that might help the baby sleep longer through the night without waking. And I get a bit cross about that because it's really not fair on parents. You see, the night waking is not because of the feeds. It's not because of the breastfeeding or indeed the bottle feeding in the night. It's not because a bad habit has been set up. It's because developmentally that little one is hardwired to reach out for parental contact in the night. And that the positive news is that increasingly, say at the 12-month mark, I was sharing with you that the figures that maybe half of our little ones might go for 8 hours most nights without signalling. The other half are still signalling a few times in the night, maybe every couple of hours, and that's developmentally normal. By 2 years, we're nearly there. 5% may still be waking in the night. The other 95% are starting to sleep much more aligned with parents.
I feel like I'm going to be in that 5%.
And look, it's tough, but it's normal. And
Yeah.
that's the reassurance, I suppose, that I like to give families. And it passes. This too shall pass.
Right. Okay, so we have a lot of questions for you, but unfortunately, we're going to start to wrap it up. So we're going to do about 3 more. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Let me see here. I have a 5-month-old. These are all from different people. Everybody's got 5 months old.
5-month-old features tonight.
I have a 5-month-old and a 5-year-old. Sleep is so different with baby number 2. We don't use swaddle or white noise, and she wakes less often. But in the evening, we turn the lights off, and when the sun goes down. Should we leave the lights on until her older brother goes to sleep at 9 p.m., or is it helpful to slow the stimulation, as it's getting closer to bedtime?
Yes, well, my answer would be just leave those lights on and have a great evening together with the whole family, including the 5-month-old in with the 5-year-old in family life. So you do often get the message that somehow sleep is helped by dimming the lights in the evening. But again, it misunderstands the sleep science. We're waiting on that 5-month-old sleep pressure to build nice and high. And that just means lots of sensory engagement. And dimming the light isn't going to impact on that rising sleep pressure or how quickly that sleep pressure rises. Melatonin tracks what's happening with the sleep pattern, but it doesn't actually, in the way people tell you melatonin is stimulated by dimming the light, it's misunderstanding how the sleep science works. Melatonin will track what's happening with sleep, but it's not going to bring on sleep to be dimming the lights or to be quietening the kids down. If anything, unfortunately, our babies will start to dial up in a context of dim lights and everyone trying to be quiet, because they have this voracious hunger in the evenings for rich and changing sensory input. That is lots of interaction. And hilarious, loud physical games are very good for baby's nervous system. So that's not the sympathetic nervous system dialing up. That's actually really good for the baby's autonomic nervous system to be having great rowdy play and lots of physical interaction with the 5-year-old. That's really good, meets the sensory needs. The sleep pressure's quietly rising. You as a parent might kind of know that the sleep pressure's rising, but you don't have to put that little one down to sleep straight away. You wait till the sleep pressure's really high and then move into the big sleep at night, and that's when the lights are off. So it can be light, noise, activity, it's all happening, family time. Okay, now it's with the 5-year-old, no doubt, it's story time. Everyone's dialing down with that. With the 5-month-old, depending on that family's situation, it might be a breastfeed, it might be a bottle feed, it might be a rock and soothe. But that's when the sleep pressure is really high, and then it just happens quickly. That going into sleep, we're not in a state of sleep battles where the baby's sleep pressure isn't that high and we're sort of trying for an hour to get the baby to sleep. Sensory. Oh, the sleep pressure is really high. I think I'll try a little feed now. And then the big sleep lights off.
Great, thank you. Second to last question. I know you said that a baby's sleep pressure rises faster during the day. Is there a recommendation for how many daytime naps one should have? If so, how does that recommended amount of time change with age?
Yes, an important question. And you'll notice that I'm not giving any recommendations, which sounds scary to parents because you feel like, how do you do it? but actually what we're doing is inviting parents to take off the sleep lens in the way they do the days, put on the rich and changing sensory nourishment lens, get outside the house, even if it's, visiting friends or, as we were saying. So moving out of your boring interior environment, babies find it so boring in their own homes. And then just having a day that's really rich in sensory nourishment, which basically means the primary carer is having a good day outside the house, socializing, getting some walking done, meeting in a parent group, whatever it is. And the baby just goes along, lovely, rich, changing sensory environment. Sleep can be trusted to look after itself. So that little one might just snatch a little nap in the car seat, or might drop off at the end of a feed for a moment. And then you put the bubby down and they're wide awake. That's very normal. Cry, wide awake. They'll cry, not because they need to go back to sleep, but because, where are you? Where's my mother? Where's my loving person?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean we have to put them back for second sleep cycles. It's on with the day. So it kind of sounds scary, but we can trust our babies to take the naps that they need in the context of rich and changing sensory nourishment, and indeed, a tummy that's adequately filled. And actually, we don't have to be trying to get the baby to sleep or trying to keep the baby asleep. I know it sounds very strange. Experiment is all I say. Just give it a go.
All right, thank you. So then now we kind of have a question about a toddler. We have a 21-month-old who still seems to need 2 naps, sleeps well at night, but she seems to prefer the morning nap if I had to select one, but how can we ease the transition to 1 nap?
Yes, and you can see here, this would be a high sleep need 2-year-old. I just want to say that to sort of moderate expectations for everyone else, because there's a lot of 12-month-olds who actually stop daytime naps, just to put it in context. So we've got a little 2-year-old. The nights are great, which is fantastic. This has been working for this family, but they're ready now to think about shrinking those 2 naps for the 2-year-old into 1. And this is where sensory nourishment would be our tool. We'd just be, and it might take a couple of weeks when things feel a little bit unsettled, but we'd just be nudging that first nap a little bit later one day, 15 minutes later the next day, seeing if you can do another 10 minutes later the next day. And it might be you stabilize there for a few days. And eventually we reach the point where it's the 1 nap in the middle of the day, rather than the 2 naps for this 2-year-old.
All right.
It's incremental. Incremental is the key.
Incremental changes. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I think this could keep going forever, but we have to eventually wrap it up. But thank you for coming to Bakersfield College. I'll throw it over to Leo.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Douglas, again, thank you so much. Professor Cho, thank you for bringing Dr. Douglas to us. This event, I think, has been simply brilliant. And really, more than anything else, we hope that this short time together will bring our parents, our caretakers in the audience some sense of reprieve and some sense of calm, or minimally just more resources. Again, I'm not a parent, but I'm sending tremendous love and light to all parents, caretakers currently managing constant waking, currently supporting energized little ones during less ideal times. Y'all are amazing. True power to you all. And thank you to everyone in general just for being here. We hope to see you at our next event. If you'd like to revisit this presentation, I know some folks were asking, happy to do so. You can do that by visiting our YouTube. That's our BCSGA YouTube. I dropped it in the chat a little bit earlier. I can share that again. And beyond that, any of our attendees today, I will make sure to email the link once our video has rendered and is posted. In November, we actually have a modern day guardian of the galaxy, Dr. Moo Cooper, who holds the awesome responsibility of keeping the red planet safe from any of the Earth's contaminants. Dr. Moo Cooper was our planetary protection lead of the famed NASA 2020 Mars mission. So that's our next speaker. We've had Dr. Douglas. We have our speakers all the way through April, and we're so thankful that you can join us today. You can always find out more at our student events /DSS. And if you have any other questions, suggestions, insights, hey, think about bringing them to campus, think about doing this, please email us at studentlife@bakersfieldcollege.edu. We're always so thankful to hear from anyone who wants to attend our events. But right now, what I want to do is simply just give Dr. Douglas another warm round of applause. If you can send it out into the universe, I'm sure she can receive it. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Douglas. If we can blow up the chat with comments and love and appreciation, that would be very, very heartfelt.
Thank you. It's just been a
Absolutely.
great pleasure.
Professor Cho, anything else for you on your end?
I think that's it for me. It's been a privilege.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you all so much. We will see you at the next event. Until then, you have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Dr. Douglas, you are getting tons of praise in the chat. It is definitely felt and seen the appreciation that our BC and our Bakersfield community has for you. So again, thank you.
Well, it's my great pleasure. I hope, Ashley, that was something along the lines of what you'd conceptualized.
Oh, it was that and more.
Pleased. I'm pleased. Well, it's been a great privilege. Thank you so much for organizing it for me.
Thank you for taking the time to answer all those questions. I think we did 12.
Oh,
That's a lot.
it's important. There's so much that we could talk about, and no, it's been important. That's where I really get that sense of engagement, and no, so I'm delighted.
Yeah, it was. I mean, those questions just kind of came in hot near the end. You know, folks were like, okay, how do I frame the question? And there's a need. I mean, I think more than anything else, our participants who were with us, there was just such a significant need for like, this is what's happening at home for me, and how do I deal with this? So yeah,
and normalizing a lot of it is also really big, right? And a lot of the sleep training information you hear it requires a certain amount of privilege to have all of these extra rooms in your house and all this extra equipment, and a lot of people don't have that or want that, and so it's wonderful to hear there's an alternative that makes sense.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think, of a number, early on in your presentation, like those who are sleeping through the night. I mean, that's much more of the outlier than the norm, right? And I think what we see is usually,
depending on the age,
what we hear is usually the opposite. And so, yeah, absolutely, normalizing it is so critical. All right, folks. Well, I think that brings us to the end. I know some folks are still trickling out. But again, Dr. Douglas, thank you. I just wanted to do a quick check and see if there was anything that you needed from us, from me, as we wrap up.
No, thank you. Thank you for your patience with me through Jane disappearing and so on, but I think I've already thanked you for that. No, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for making it so smooth for me.
Wonderful. Well, if there's nothing else, what I will do is, as soon as our video renders, I will post it to our YouTube, and I can get a list of all of our attendees. Just download that report, and I will send them the link directly to our YouTube, and that'll be up for the next couple weeks.
Fantastic.
Sounds
Fantastic.
Professor Cho, do you need anything else from me or from Dr. Douglas at the moment?
I don't think so. Thank you so much.
All right, y'all.
My pleasure. Maybe you'll visit Brisbane one day and get in touch with me. You'd be very welcome.
Oh,
but you know, COVID, our borders aren't terribly open yet, but in time, who knows?
I'll be there. Maybe with a 10-year-old, but I'll be there.
That's right. Goodness. Strange times. Okay. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Nikki. Bye.